Welcome to the ChangeMakers Podcast, produced by cityCURRENT. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're in for a treat when you talk about student-led organizations making a difference, powering the good. We get to talk about EEqual, and we get to dive in the world of social entrepreneurialism. We are joined by Matine Khalighi, and Matine is a student and an incoming first-year student at Harvard University. He's also a founder with EEqual, the Executive Director. We'll talk about EEqual and all the amazing work that they're doing. But Matine, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. So excited to be here. I love the energy. I'm in Denver, Colorado. We're having a lot of snow. So I'm really excited to have some positive energy because it's so dead right now. But I'm really, really excited to be here. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll definitely dive in and talk about the work you're doing. The part of the fun of ChangeMakers, though, is we get to know your personal story. So give us a little background of just your childhood, where you grew up. I know you're in Colorado right now, but talk about your childhood.
Yeah, so I grew up born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and I always went to just general public school. I didn't really have anything special, but I always really loved being involved in my community, and my parents always stressed the importance of volunteering. We would always go down to the homeless shelters, pass out food, go to 5K runs, always very involved, and really, really instilled a passion for giving back and realizing how important that was from such a young age. And finally in middle school, I was put in a community service class that was centered around making a difference, which kind of gave me a platform, let alone the excuse to start thinking like, what can Matine do? Not only what can Matine be a part of, but and that's where the inspiration led, but always had a lot of community service involvement from a young age. And I think that's significantly influenced the kind of work I'm doing today.
Any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I do have an older brother and no sisters. I have 2 dogs though. So, and they're loud dogs, but we love them.
So, you mentioned really middle school, 8th grader, all of a sudden you're being given a chance to not only be a part of something, but to really look at the lens of how do I become a leader and create change? And I think at an early age, that's a pretty powerful catalyst. Talk about that in terms of being an 8th grader and realizing, wait a second, like you said, now I'm not just a part of something, now I can create something. Talk about kind of that pivot in your life.
Yeah. So I think since ever I've known, young people have always been kind of told that, your time will come. You don't try and do too much. You should really be focused on school. There's certain things you can be involved in, certain things you're going to have to wait for. And I get there's some merit to that. But when it comes to community service, I don't think that's the case. And the reason that my mind shift changed was in 8th grade. I signed up for this class. It was called Building a Better Community. And on the first day, the teacher gave us a sheet of paper. There's literally 4 things of it. It was get in a group, talk about current issues in our community, plan on doing something to make a difference. And then at the end of the quarter, you're going to give a presentation about what you did. So my friends and I kind of just were like, oh, this is interesting. Not your typical like math homework or, we're not like learning any new formulas. We're just like actually applying all of the skills that we've gained as 8th graders, though it might be limited, to the real world, and that we can do something. So I think our teacher set it up that it's you guys now. So it's not about, what you're being told to do. It's like you have the creativity, now figure out what you want to do and just go out there and try it. So I did with my group a fundraising project for a local foster care shelter. So I was the kid that stood outside of grocery stores that would always be asking for money, and then everyone else would walk through the other door to try and avoid me, but I would like insist on coming near you with my flyer. Like you wouldn't allowed to like leave without getting the flyer from me. So, and I had so much fun. And then at the end, I got to go to the shelter and kind of meet some of the kids who were struggling. And I think we raised about $1,000, which for 8th graders was huge at the moment. We were like, oh my gosh, this is the more money than I've ever seen in my whole life. And then like we were able to do like a little big check and give it to them. And it was really a cool experience. And one of my close friends did the same thing. She was in the same class. We didn't work in the same group, but we were friends, and we had a lot of fun. She approached me and she was like, why don't we're 8th graders. We have a lot of time. Like that was easy. Like we can do that. We can continue to do that. It was a lot of fun. Do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. And we thought again, like what can we do to support our community? And we thought of people experiencing homelessness. That had always been an issue that I had noticed being a kid, like driving in the back seat, and I would see people holding up signs. I was very confused about why there was so much difference and why there's so young people and families and all this struggle. So, and she was feeling the same way. And then we were like, okay, we're going to do a service project. And then long story short, months later, we realized, to get people to give us more funding, to be able to pass out more basic necessities, it might be easier if we're just categorized as a nonprofit. That way we can go into restaurants, have them give us like their leftover food. So I want you to imagine like two middle schoolers sitting in the cafeteria with like the IRS's website open. Well, first it was Googling what is the IRS, right? And then second, it was like, what form do we have to fill out? And then like a dictionary and us like piecing this all together. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, there was just so much energy for just trying to do something then that didn't really deter us. And
that's real application right there. I mean, when you talk about being a student and learning on the fly, that's
right.
I do want to go back to, because I mean, this will set the stage obviously for EEqual and everything you're doing now, but
yeah,
I do think it's important because when you talk about social entrepreneurialism, and especially at an early age where it really is the formative years and the perfect opportunity, especially for teachers who are listening to this and watching this, to be able to empower students. And like you said, it wasn't like you were being told what to do. It's like, hey, go and create this. And I think you can look at the world from a lens of negativity and say, oh, look at all these challenges, or you can look at it as an opportunity to solve a problem. And when you look at it as, oh, there's an opportunity for me to realize a challenge, but to go in and be a problem solver, which is where entrepreneurialism really starts. That to me is the key, is giving you the freedom and the flexibility to think big, but ultimately own it. And you took ownership. And when you look at what you did to take ownership, and then you got to see the effect. You got to see the result of your $1,000 that you raised, and going in there and being able to see, wait a second, to me, that's the process that then puts you on a different path for your life. So kind of tie that together in terms of the freedom to create, to be a problem solver, but ultimately to see the payoff and the impact that I think really does pull at your heartstring to want to do it even more.
Yeah. I think, this is even more relevant now with how much is going on in the world. And we're all talking about these huge system changes, which to the person or the middle schooler in the basement seems like too much to tackle. But, taking a step back, you have to remember that every person that we helped is another person, right? So taking what I like to call like the big numbers out of the equation, I think it's very easy in the nonprofit sector to be, we helped thousands of people, millions of products, whatever. But taking a step back and remember each of the people that you're helping, that's a person's life. So that is so valuable. And like change, I think sometimes is marketed and branded as it needs to be massive and that it's quick, but that's not the way that change really works. Like it takes time, it's hard, but it's about one person at a time. And I think we have to really narrow in as a society. And like, if anyone's listening and feeling overwhelmed by like, oh my gosh, there's so much the world needs right now, what am I going to do? I think that's the thinking we have to pull people away from, because it's the exact opposite. Because if you think about it, if you and I together started something, or, we're at different communities, and if every person had that idea to not feel overwhelmed, but rather that, I know the world has a lot going on, but there is some small part I can play, then that's the kind of thinking that drives us forward, because then it becomes a community effort. Then it becomes teamwork. Then it becomes not about trying to depend on one person or one organization to make massive change, but that everyone's working together towards a common goal, right? So I think it's really, really important that we had that teacher and that class that was all about very local level, very, very in the classroom, young. It doesn't matter your age, that you can do something. And I think, that set the stage, like you said, for everything. Like I always think, if I didn't take that class, or if I didn't have that teacher that really clarified to me that no matter your age, like you don't need a degree to make a difference. You don't need a degree to fundraise. I didn't know I didn't take a fundraising course. I was probably really annoying at it, but like it was fun. And people, raised some money and it made a difference. So like taking all of that, I think a lot of times we think we need to know so much more, rather than just like, if you have the passion and the drive, like just go out there and try and do something. We're all learning. And there's so many people out there to help. And I think the world's landscape has completely changed, especially for young people. I mean, if we look at the largest social movements happening in the nation right now in the past couple of years, they're being spearheaded by young people. So back when I was in 8th grade, which is what, 5 years ago, I don't think that was as common, but now I think the platform is really changing. We have the Black Lives Matter movement this past summer. We had March for Our Lives. Like, those are huge social movements that young people are really taking the lead on. And I think it's important that as a society, we start to recognize that it's not, age shouldn't be an excuse for indifference, that no matter your age, you can do something. And we're starting to see that young people are actually really, really good at it. Like, they come in with a fresh approach. They have fresh ideas and a fresh vision, and they're excited and super passionate. Like, the energy they bring to the table is unparalleled. So instead of, leaning on the old ways of, well, it's not their time yet, you're just in school or whatever, we should be actually more excited to get these students at such a young age involved. So I guess everyone listening, if you have the chance, or in somewhere in your business, in your nonprofit itself, or any community efforts, like, always try and include young people, because I really think we do bring something amazing to the table, whether it's drive, whether it's new ideas. Possibilities are endless.
Yeah. And I think the common theme there is that you're rooted in purpose. Your purpose gives you power. And to your point, that's not an age factor. It really gives you the ability to mobilize, to connect. But when you're rooted in purpose, that gives you power, and that gives you a huge platform to be able to create change. And I think that's what you saw at an early age, which then obviously sets the stage. And so when you talk about, Googling, what is the IRS? All of that could seem very arduous and task and, very difficult. But the reality is, you were rooted in purpose. And so now it's like, that's a necessary part to get to the end result. It's fun. Or at least it's an opportunity that you don't mind taking, because the higher purpose. And so I think, to me, that's the key of this. Being rooted in purpose gives you power, but it also gives you focus to know that all these other steps are just steps to get you to the end result that you're headed. So go ahead and carry that forward to EEqual and kind of launching EEqual.
Yeah. So back where I left off, summer going into freshman year of high school, we had this organization on our hands, and my friend and I would go on, during the summertime, we had so much time. So it was like twice a week, we would go collect food from local bakeries, and then we would turn them into sandwiches. We would go fundraise a little, then we would go do a little. It was not like we didn't have strategic plans. We didn't have any of that stuff. It was just 2 8th graders who were trying to do something. It was Saturday morning. I would go wake up my dad and say, we need a ride downtown. Obviously, we can't even drive yet.
What did your parents think, though? Were they fully supportive, or were they like, Matine's a little crazy, but we're going to let him roll with this?
I think they were excited that I was doing something. I think when I came home and said, like, oh yeah, we're filing with the IRS, they started to get a little bit nervous. They were just like, okay, I mean, that's like pretty serious, but like, are you sure? Is this legal? Like, are you even allowed to? Like, how does this all work? So there was some concern, but I think our biggest point was that fall. So we'd been doing it twice a week. And then I reached out to a local magazine, and they did a story on us. And then all of a sudden, all of, our mini website that we didn't have branding, we didn't have anything. Then people started to take us seriously, and then we started to get more donations, and then it kind of grew and grew. And we did that for about 2 years. That was the only thing we did, was passing out basic necessities. So we grew to the point where we were able to do hygiene materials. We partnered with local nonprofits and hotels who had leftover shampoo or whatever. We would take that, and then we started to recruit our classmates. So for my school alone, we probably had over 60, 70 kids volunteer with us every Saturday. Then we started, getting on Facebook, and then different people would reach out to us. Businesses started reaching out and say that they want to join. And that was all we would do. So we would just pass out. And it was pretty cool. Like, we did that for a long, long time. But throughout that time, we started to notice an even bigger need, which really set the platform for EEqual. Was when we were going out and distributing things, one of the biggest messages that we had was, it's not just about passing out the product, it's about learning the stories of people experiencing homelessness, because they're actually really amazing. Like, I think a lot of people think that poverty and homelessness is rooted in drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, but that's actually a really small portion of the whole problem. And you start to learn a lot about life stories that are very similar to what a lot of us started as, and it turned into something completely different. So start to realize more and more could happen to anyone. And I think one of the tipping points was when we started learning about students. Like, there were so many young people out there, and we would go to youth homeless shelters, and it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm talking to my peers and they're living a completely different life than myself. And that felt wrong. Like, it's not right that, I go home, I'm able first in a privileged position to be able to run an organization, to be able to think about that, let alone never had to worry about where my next meal was going to be. How is it going to finish my homework? How am I going to hop on the internet? Like, those are challenges that these kids would go through. And I think a lot of our team members would notice that. And I think it inspired us to continue doing what we were doing. And then that led us all the way through my senior year of high school, where after our second benefit gala, it was an amazing fundraiser. And by the way, this organization was called Helping the Homeless Colorado. So, we had over 150 people come to our event. We raised a plus of $30,000. It was really, really incredible. The whole thing was, again, run by teens. And then,
how old were you at this point doing this?
I was 17 at that point. So lots of,
talk about lessons learned at an early age. I mean, that's awesome. I'm curious from that vantage point, and we'll continue forward, but how did the adults take you in terms of your approach when you're out there fundraising and putting all this together? Were they welcoming you warmly, or was it a kind of difficult? Like, talk about kind of that process of being youth, but also trying to get money from adults and manage all of these very difficult building blocks, so to speak, but doing it through adults that you're leaning on them. So was that easy? Was it difficult? What was that like?
No, at the beginning. So like flashback to 8th grade, that was actually the hardest part about Helping the Homeless Colorado, was we had a really hard time getting people to take us seriously. So we would, fundraise outside of the grocery store, and like we would be there for 8 to 9 hours, and we would raise like $300. But overwhelmingly, there was some people who gave, but about 60% of the time, we had people who were just like, well, they would like question us about budgets. And like my co-founder and I were like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, we raised $300, we go get turkey sandwiches. Like, we weren't thinking like that. And we had a lot of people say, you're probably just better off joining another organization. Like, how effective is what you were doing? Are you guys like even legally allowed to be doing this? Like, you should be just focusing on school at the moment. This is a little like odd for you to be this involved. I mean, we had so much of that. And that's why I brought up the thing about getting featured in a magazine, because the people who first called us cute, and then we got featured on like Denver's largest magazine, then we were on TV, and then like things started to grow. Like, some people actually really, the people who sort of supported us from the beginning started to become even more supportive. And then like the people who were calling it cute my freshman year, by my senior year, were guests at our gala, and then they were donating thousands of dollars, right, to support our mission. So it was a long challenge to get that mindset change among especially our adults, which we needed their support, right? Like, when we're talking about disposable income, it's not that easy to approach just teenagers, but really focusing on our foundation. And I think as a team, we had to remember that like we have to work twice as hard to get every donation. So we have to be extremely professional. We have to, things really, really matter. And you have to own our brand and own our position as much as we can, as much as like it makes people giggle sometimes when I would like in my email signature write like I'm the executive director of Helping the Homeless Colorado. Like, that was received well by some people, but after a while people start to take it seriously. So it took 3 to 4 years to build that relationship with donors, but I think it came more from just how consistent we were, that it wasn't just an 8th grade project. Now he's almost graduating, like he's still doing this. I mean, Matine doesn't like go. What's wrong with? I'm kidding, but
some questions that I think are important with this. One is, what's one lesson that you would, or what's a bit of encouragement, but a lesson you learned that you would encourage for other youth to help build credibility? And you mentioned the email and the signature in the email, a long-term approach, consistency. I think that's a huge one. But what's one other thing that you would encourage for other youth when it comes to building credibility with adults to win their support and their trust? What's one other bit of encouragement?
I think it's really intimidating to ask people for money, especially when you're super young. Like, people don't take you seriously, but what you can always do is ask for advice. So the rule in like nonprofit world, which I think it applies so much more to teens, especially because it's so much harder for us to make that ask, is always ask for advice and you'll get money. But if you ask for money, you'll get advice. So we always started asking for advice. Like, you have a background in media. Like, let me ask you about, we want to we're doing this like event on Saturday. How do we get like press coverage? And then that person is like, oh, it's so sweet. Like, let me help them out. And then they start paying attention even more. And then like 2 times later, we send out on our newsletter, like, $50, commit to equal to, or to helping the homeless today. And then he becomes a donor. Right. So it's like, and then once he does it, then his circle kind of pays attention. So always asking for advice, and like, not coming into it with the attitude of like, why won't they support me? But like, sometimes support doesn't come through money. It comes through relationships and networking. So, and on top of all that, if you're going to make the ask, always ask for advice, but being very consistent and like owning your brand. And I think being very unapologetic and like never be ashamed of the work you're doing, even though it can, I got laughed at a lot. It was fine. Like, I mean, I really wished if you told me in 8th grade that like you would get to a point where people really do take you seriously, I would have been like, I don't believe you. But I mean, I'm here now, right? So yeah. Like it takes time, but I really just owned the brand as much as I could. I would post about it on my personal social media. I would go, if anyone gave me a microphone to talk, I would talk about it, and just constant exposure. And I think people really register that. And it's a lot to do with how you carry yourself as well. Like, I had to be extra careful of how I describe the work we're doing, because I'm going to get a lot more ridicule and a lot more criticism than maybe an adult who's doing that, because it's just easier for adults to kind of roast a teen instead of roast someone their age, right? So,
but I think to your point, and anybody who's watching this on video versus just listening to the podcast would see, you carry yourself very professionally. And to your point, those are all things that you kind of learn along the way. But
yes,
that right there, the way you talk, the way you tell your stories, the way you interact, the way you carry yourself, all of those little things make a big difference. And ultimately, that then paints the future that you're painting.
Yeah.
One more question, then we'll get back to equal. When did it click for your parents? So when did it become real for them of, wait a second, this, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, filling out the paperwork is one piece of it, but I think at some point it kind of clicks for them, like, wait, this is legitimately what he's doing.
I think, my parents were really first when we got some news publications. I relate to that. I keep bringing that up because I just think it's so important for some reason, like the news and like having another brand endorse you. Yeah, it adds a lot. So that was like building on that. But my sophomore year of high school, I think what really clicked for both of my parents was I'm a part of an organization called Ashoka, and they're a social entrepreneurship network across the world. And they found me, emailed me and said, like, we want to set up an interview. And I was like, okay. And then they flew me out to DC, and I met 10 others, and both my parents came on that trip. And I met 10 other amazing teen social entrepreneurs, and like learning their stories, but also the fact that, an organization's coming out here and saying like, Matine, you're coming with us. And then I think for my parents, not only did it click that like the work I was doing was super, super valuable, like that this could be something long term, but also seeing what those other teens were doing, like it sets up a framework of like, oh my gosh, why aren't we highlighting these stories more? Like, this is a really, actually, when you're in that room with all of us, it's like, it's not as uncommon to have a youth-led organization and look at what they can accomplish. So I think the mindset shift really happened there. And then I think that was a huge mindset shift for me too, because it was hard to know. Like, I always thought I was leading a blind path myself, like with my co-founder, and we were just figuring it out as we go. And then once I got connected with other teen social entrepreneurs, you learn so much from each other. And like, that's who I go and ask for help for now, as much because they know how to do it. Like we're helping each other out. It's like your own network there. So, but I think once larger organizations and fellowships started to approach me, that's when like it really, really clicked that not only is this it's more than just a school project. It's more than just a small community service. Like, this could actually last a while, and it could be really, really big. So I think that not only for my parents, but for myself too.
Yeah. And I love that kind of connectivity, because it becomes, wait a second, others are doing it. Like you said, you become your own network, support group for each other, sharing best practices and ideas and what's working. But it's also one of those where it really solidifies it, because you realize, wait a second, they're out there doing it. I can do it too, because I see my peers out there conquering the world in a good way and making a difference, empowering the good. I can do this too. So, which then it creates even more clarity for all the youth that are coming up behind even you to say, hey, Matine's doing it. If he can do it, I want to do it too. So all of that, when you see it, you can become it. And I think that's a really powerful piece of the equation. So carry it forward, to how do you describe the work that you're doing with EEqual today? So what's your elevator pitch at this point?
Right. So, well, first I'll go a little bit back. So we were like end of my senior year of high school. We were like, you know what? This is really cool. We built a really cool movement here. How do we make it grow further? Like, I'm graduating. I'm probably not going to be in state. A lot of our team wasn't probably going to stay. Like, how do we take this to the next level? And that's where really the idea of EEqual was born, was we're going to narrow in on specific group of people who are struggling, which is students experiencing homelessness. We have so many organizations right now working with people. You see it on the street, mental health, jobs, all that good stuff. But then when it comes to teens, student poverty and homelessness, first of all, there's a complete lack of knowledge that the problem even exists, which thus means there's less organizations working with them. But it's like, this is our niche. This is where we, especially as young people, can become advocates for our struggling peers. So why not enter this sector? And so we started the idea of EEqual about a year ago today, or not today, but last week sometime. And then we went through about a 9-month building process of the whole organization. We launched it this past summer, and essentially EEqual, we're a for youth by youth nonprofit organization. And we want to break the cycle of poverty, and we're investing in education in order to do that. So we work specifically with students experiencing extreme poverty or homelessness. That's our target group. So, and we do the whole thing through education, because it is the most effective way to do that. The research shows, the studies show that education is the way to go. So a little bit about what we do. We have 2 kind of core programs within the organization. We have a scholarship program. So it's called the EEqual Scholarship Awards Program. Right now, it's available to any student who is struggling in Colorado. Our goal is to continue to expand that to different nations, but essentially we pay for the tuition of students, high school seniors, young adults who want to go to college, but they don't have the resources to do so, and they're struggling with homelessness. We pay for them to go to community college, vocational school, trade school, 4-year school, whatever their desires are. That's what we'll support with them. But on top of that, we pair them up with a mentor and someone who can kind of be there to support, like, on top of your scholarship. Like, first, we want you to stay connected with the organization, but 2, like, if you're struggling to reach out to a teacher, you don't know what to do in this certain situation, you need someone to bounce ideas off of, we have a team of mentors who are there to support those students. So that's our biggest program. And then the second program is really just how we get young people involved. And it's through chapters, which we're really excited that we're going to be piloting in hopefully 6 to 10 schools this year, and then do a huge call for a nationwide network of chapters next fall. But essentially, it's all rooted in advocacy. And I think this has been a lot harder, especially with the education system being partially closed, all virtual. We've had to, when we were planning EEqual a year ago, we didn't have this problem. So there were so many revisions we had to go through. But essentially, what we like to do is bring the conversation surrounding student poverty and homelessness to the table. Because, the example I give always is, in my high school, in my calculus class last year, there's 30 kids, and there very well could have been 4 to 5 kids in my class who are going to be sleeping in their cars. We're going to be going to a homeless shelter or crashing at a friend's place because they don't have a home of their own. But nobody knows that. And that's a huge problem, because if you don't know about something, you can't act on it. So, and then we have to just work to erase this stigma around coming out and asking for help. And that people in the classroom need to be very woke, if you will, about like what the problem is. Like, when you make the joke that I look like a homeless person today, you never know who's sitting next to you and what they're going to be struggling with. But we don't think about those things because we don't know that this is really a problem in the United States. So we build school clubs. They're called like equal clubs. Essentially, students come together, and the idea right now, especially with the virtual world, is they host discussions together around the challenge in their specific community, and then also take the time to learn about it. So reach out to your principal and ask, like, what is the current state? Like, how many students aren't able to afford AP testing? Like, I need to know these things so that I can be a better, and more involved student. And it goes back to where I started in 8th grade of like, if I had the knowledge and the platform and the ability to create change, it came from just not like knowing that I could. So if we can get these students to start thinking as well, like, well, this is the problem, what if I like created something, or like, here's where because of what I know from the EEqual program, like, and because EEqual as an organization kind of urged me to take the next step to learn more about the problem in my community, maybe this is where I can fill a gap as a student and a student leader. So that's really the concept of, reaching out to local legislators, learning about what legislation right now is there about student poverty and homelessness, reaching out to local homeless shelters, talking to them about the problem, like becoming more educated. And then also, if a current bill in your community comes out that's in support of that, who better than to be supporting these and driving these forward in campaign than young people who have so much energy? So it's really trying to build a relationship on the national level towards one core mission, but also being very specific to your community, because education varies from district to district, state to state. Like, it's not the same across the nation. So we can't build one generalized program for the whole nation. That's not effective. So we really, really want students to become the leaders in their community of, oh, here's how we can make a difference here. So that's a little bit about how.
Yeah. And I think, even at a basic level, you're humanizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think there's a layer of this that you are breaking down a lot of the, not necessarily stereotypes, but the stigmas. And I go to bullying. And to your point, like where you mentioned, oh, I look like a homeless person, how that could be a throwaway statement, but very derogatory, obviously, right? Yeah. But I also think that for those who are facing homelessness, to your point, they're not going to talk about it because they don't want to get bullied. They want to fit in. They want to have what the others have, and they just want to fit in and be normal. Mm-hmm. And so if the other students can come around and I'll never forget, Ben Nimpton was talking about mental, health, he called it brain fitness, because he's like, you got to put a positive spin on it, not just mental health, but brain fitness. He's like, it's on the 3 out of the 4 that are the healthy to make sure that the 1 out of the 4 who's not feels good and can open up. Yeah. And it's the same thing is if I'm working to better understand homelessness and I'm fighting for it as a cause, and I then see it, I'm not going to say mean things. I'm going to invite them in and do everything in my power to make them feel like they're a part of something. They're a part of the family. Yeah. And so in a way, you're breaking down bullying, you're breaking down all these other things that come along with it that are so pervasive at that age. And so I think there's a really powerful piece of this, not only for the fight on the front lines, but on the mental side of just people coming together and better understanding each other and building those relationships and having empathy for each other. It really is powerful for what you're doing too.
You're saying our core values. So EEqual's core values are equity, empathy, and inclusivity. That's the whole mission. It's like, if we can get students, it's really hard right now to create super large, like, initiation. Like, there's so much going on in the world, but if we can create these students an environment for them to learn more, who knows what kind of value that's going to add in the future. Not only if they interact with someone who's struggling, now they know even better what the situation they're going through looks like. They know how they can be helpful. But in the future, we don't know what that's going to inspire them to do. Like, what if someone really, really, if you don't know about the issue, you can't do anything. That's the whole, like, the point. So we have to first, I'd love the first wave of EEquals, in the next couple of years to really be pushing a new understanding around student poverty and homelessness, because right now in the United States, over 12.9 million students are in poverty and 1.3 million are experiencing homelessness, but we don't know that. Like, people don't talk about that. And that's huge. That's a lot of people. So back to like the big number to like the really, really, like, that's a human's life. Like 1.3 million kids don't know where they're going to be staying in our K through 12 public school system, let alone why isn't anyone talking about that? And why isn't that a bigger conversation within our schools and among students? So that's really what we want to bring to the table and encourage students to you know what, this is an issue that we, out of everyone else, any other age group, should be caring the most about, because it's your own peers, like it's your own classmates that are struggling. So you should feel not only very connected to the issue, but also like it's your chance to come make a difference.
What's the first step? So talking to youth out there who feel overwhelmed, who feel like there's so much going on and I'm just trying to survive, but I want to find purpose. I want to take a step forward. What would your words of encouragement be for that one step forward? What's that one step? What does that look like, you think?
Yeah. So I got this advice from, long story short, I got connected with Justin Baldoni, who's he was the actor on Jane the Virgin, the show. And he does a lot of work around homelessness. So we connect all the time. He knows a lot about what EEqual does. But essentially the biggest piece of advice he gave me was always ask the population you're trying to serve how you can be helpful. So if you're someone who's really, really excited about like, you know, I want to make a difference. And I guess backtracking to that first step is like, if you're excited to make a difference, go out there and figure out, what does your community need? Like, don't come in there with the idea that you know what everyone needs. And I say this because that was a little bit of a mistake we made in helping the homeless Colorado. Is we assumed, well, if you're homeless, really what you need is shampoo, toilet paper, and a meal, which is not wrong necessarily. That is a problem. But, you know, how did we learn about EEqual's need? We learned from talking to people and hearing their stories that, oh, whoa, there's more to this than just the surface level that we see a lot. So I always like to say, like, the world doesn't need necessarily more nonprofits or community missions. Like, we need more effective ones. So the effectiveness piece comes from, you know, putting our human egos aside and saying, you know what, I really don't know much about this issue, and I'm not going to judge it based on the fact of like what I see the media portrays it as, or like what people talk about it as. Like, I'm going to spend a week at minimum just asking, talking, learning, reading about what I'm trying to do. So if you want to go into the mental, it applies to everything: mental health, the environment, animals, homelessness, education, like all of them. There is so much out there already happening. So take this time to learn. And that's the most critical step. And then make your judgment call about what you want to do, whether it's you're seeing a missing, like a gap that you think you can fill, versus, oh, I love what this organization's doing, I'm going to throw my support behind them and, you know, power their movement forward because I align with it closely. Like, always make sure you're taking that step, because, and I think this comes from a place that we don't talk about volunteerism. We don't talk about community service. Like, we don't stress it enough, especially at a young age. So when the time comes around, it comes around like a requirement. There's so many National Honor Society, whatever, in high school, that's just like, get 20 community service hours. So kids jump into it, but they don't really learn the purpose behind what you're doing. So purpose comes from talking to the people you're trying to serve. And I think that will we got to shift the mindset of community service not to be a requirement, not a signature on a sheet of paper. That's fine if that's part of it, but it has to be purpose behind what you're doing, because there's so many issues out here. I guarantee you everyone listening to this has something they really care about and they want to learn more about. So that's fine. Like, if your thing is not student poverty and homelessness, you don't have to do that. You know, there's so many other things you can be involved in right now, but finding purpose and then taking whatever action you plan on doing forward.
I think too, you look at the class as a pivotal moment, but I also think your foundation was set from your parents of just, hey, this is a part of, to your point, volunteerism wasn't just like a check the box. It was a part of your family. It was a part of your purpose already. So the foundation was there because of your parents. And then all of a sudden with the class, that becomes then the catalyst to put it into overdrive. Right. And now it gives you the leverage of having the power to do something about it. What's something you've learned from your parents, either a bit of advice or a lesson learned? What's something you've taken from your parents?
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, my parents, well, so both my parents are actually from Iran. So born and raised in Iran, and they had to escape Iran essentially before the revolution in the 70s because of their religion. And that there in Iran, if you, if you were a Baha'i, which is the religion I'm a part of, you couldn't go to school. So my parents wanted to get an education. So they went through this long, long journey of leaving Iran and coming to the United States on their green cards to just go to school. And I think why education has been an issue that I'm so like also passionate about. And I'm really glad that this issue of homelessness that I really care about in education, they found a merger together, because I think sometimes in the American education system, the way we set it up, like students take for granted a little bit, like what we have here and the power to go to education. So just what I think they've always taught me is to really care about your schoolwork. And but also it's not just about like your schoolwork and getting the A's or whatever. It's about like, what do you do with all of that you've learned? So that's where like, not only did they stress the importance of education, but that's where the service piece came in. It's because it's like, okay, if you're going to learn all of these things, how do you turn that into something that you give back to? Like there's no point in having a degree if you can't use it for anything. Like the point shouldn't be about, and I think this is where the message get lost right now among especially my peers and other young people like going through the education system, is we put it so much on getting the sheet of paper, getting the grade, where it's like, what are you going to do with all of that? So like, what are you going to turn that into? And a lot of times that can be rooted in giving back. And that doesn't have to mean the nonprofit sector. I mean, look at the business sector. They're transforming things just as much, right? Like Tesla is transforming our environment, like there's so many different ways that you can make an impact. So sometimes we think that's just in the nonprofit, but it's like, what do you convert first, how important education is, but how do you convert that into giving back and service of some sort? So I think that's a message they really drive home for me, which again, ties so much into the work I'm doing right now. So yeah,
love it. Tell you what, you definitely are a bright spot when you look at the future. And like you said, the future is in good hands with leaders like you stepping up to the plate. It's amazing. We're going to shift over into kind of a lightning round. So short questions, just kind of fun, short answers, just to get to know you better. What's a recent book you've read?
I just finished 7 Habits. No. I'm still finishing 7 Habits. I'm almost done. It was the 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. Don't quote me on the exact title. It's very similar to that. But I thought it was really, really important when creating a team culture that I have been learning a lot about right now, especially with EEqual, especially because I'm working with my own peers, and like, how do we create a really positive environment and keep everyone super excited to give back and continue investing in the mission. So that book was really helpful. Recommend it to everyone who's listening.
Nice. There you go. What do you like to do to relax?
Relaxing. I like to go on walks recently, especially just because like, I mean, I would say usually like hang out with friends and being around people, but you can't really do that now. But I think like I've been going on like 2-hour walk. Obviously I can't go today because it's flooded in snow, but and listening to audiobooks, like the 2 of those I think make a huge plus for me, especially because I'm able to be disconnected from your room, which I think everyone's just cooped up in their house now. So long walks and listening to audiobooks.
What's a recent either movie or TV show? What do you like to watch?
I am a big Shark Tank fan, which I know is super like, I guess maybe weird to some people listening, but I love not as much like the capitalistic side of it, but seeing how people pitch and then what they take there and like how they went back to my point before about how they went from like whatever degree they got, whatever their origins were, to what they created. And I think that's really interesting to watch. And I like it because of the inspiration part of like really like where people come from, what they had available to them, and then what they turned it into. Super inspiring always to hear those stories. And plus, like, who doesn't like a little business competition, learning about what, I need to brush up on those skills.
Amazing show. Absolutely. What's a quote or a saying that inspires you?
It's a quote from the Baha'i faith, and it's called "Let your vision," or it goes, "Let your vision be world embracing." And I think that's very fundamental to everything. First, I do, but I think a really valuable thing that the whole world could look at is like, if you look at a lot of the problems we have right now, it's because we're not inclusive, empathetic, all those core values. So it's like, let the way you look at the world, let the way your actions are carried out, like let them be very world embracing and your future thinking. So I think it's something that, I always turn to because I love that quote specifically.
Outside of your parents and the teacher and those specific people we've already talked about, who's someone that mentors and guides you?
You want me to name drop?
Yeah, you want? Yeah. You can keep it vague.
Contessa, if you're listening to this, so we actually got connected through Matt DeHare from Yes Theory, which is a YouTube channel. Anyways, long story short, but she is an amazing Gen Zer. She has accomplished so much, and I always turn to her for help and advice on everything because, again, she's someone my age. She like gets what we're going through. She has that world embracing vision. So she's listening to this. She's always been a huge inspiration and the biggest help I could have asked for. Like anything, I like reading through things, brainstorming ideas. She's kind of always helped me out with that. And I think we can really relate because we're both young and like she gets where my thinking's at. So yes.
So you have a long road ahead of you in terms of your legacy, but many, many, many years from now, decades from now, what do you hope your legacy is here on Earth?
I hope my legacy is just, this goes back to like, I'm reading the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders. And like, essentially what the question they're asking is like, when you go down in the grave, what are the things people are going to say about you? And I hope for me, it's just centered around, he was able to make an impact on people's lives, specifically those who are less fortunate in the manner of poverty and homelessness. And, I don't know where that road will exactly take me, but I just really hope that service is something that, I continue to stay true to, but also that people are able to recognize or inspired to contribute to any organization, any mission, but specifically like my favorite. And that I'm able to lead that very intentional life of building unity and service and giving back.
So last question is, where do we go to follow you and your efforts and obviously learn more about EEqual?
Yeah, so EEqual is everywhere. You can check our website out, www.equal.org. It's with 2 E's, so EEQUAL. And then we're on social media at EEqual with 2 E's nonprofit. So make sure you can give us a follow. If anyone listening has any questions, wants to learn more about my story, wants to reach out to me because there's something we can work on together, please feel free to. I'm very active on social media at Matine Khalighi, so MATINE KHALIGHI. Feel free to reach out. And I will. There's rarely been a time I haven't answered someone, so please feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, if you're a young person, have some ideas, always happy to talk to anyone and connect with anyone.
Well, Matine, you are a change maker. We greatly appreciate all you and your team are doing. Thank you very much. And thank you for obviously coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was super fun. Love sharing my stories and learning from each other and excited to keep the conversation going.